Good afternoon. This is the afternoon of May 2nd, 2021. My name's Nick Parton, and the reason I'm making this video is to hopefully give a virtual tour idea of some of the issues that rural counties in Idaho face when they go about addressing upgrading roads to accommodate growth related to housing. We're sitting just south of the intersection of Farm to Market Road and Bruce Lane in Washington County, Idaho. The road prior to probably 1950 or late 40s was called Happy Hollow Road, and it turned and went right on what's now called Bruce Lane. Where this car is sitting, Happy Hollow Road was a newly constructed road for the purpose of improving transportation methods through the county. The road from where I'm at going behind me was built after they obtained a deeded right-of-way, so it is a federal highway project on a deeded road right-of-way. Happy Hollow Road, which is now Bruce Lane, by contrast, is called a prescriptive right-of-way. In other words, it became a public road through public use. And so, as I said, this used to be Happy Hollow Road because this road was the main way to get from Midvale, Idaho to an area called Happy Hollow. After Farm to Market Road was built, the only road, or after Farm to Market was built, and probably after the late 1960s, the only house that was on this road is this house on the left, which was the Bruce place at the time, thus the name Bruce Lane when the county went to a county-wide road numbering system. And the road was maintained by the county for an all-weather residential access to this corner up here to access the Bruce Lane house. Beyond the corner, after the late 1960s, when the only remaining house that had a driveway off this road was moved out, was maintained by the county as a seasonal agricultural access road. From this curve on, in 1997, the county upgraded the road to service the residential house that's up here on the left where the trees are. Prior to 1997, this was a single lane road. And it wasn't as wide as this culvert is here. This culvert that crosses the road is a leftover from the road prior to the upgrades in 1997. An issue about prescriptive right-of-ways used to be that the public use of a prescriptive right-of-way was limited to the portion that was maintained and traveled on. And in 2002, when the remainder of this road was up for discussion about whether it ought to be upgraded to a full year-round county road, one of the issues was what was the width of the right-of-way, because it was only maintained as a single-track, limited maintenance road, which it still is. And as you can note by this sign, it notifies travelers that it is not maintained for year-round use. So in 2002 was a time period when there was a growth spurt in this area, particularly triggered by the Tamarack Resort in Valley County, and the proposal that there'd be a new highway from Emmett to Indian Valley, which provided basically a shortcut transportation from the growth areas of Boise to rural areas of Idaho and Washington County, which caused properties that were typically used as just residential, I mean not residential, but typically used as strictly agriculture to be marketed as potential home sites, and they'd be split up in accordance with the zoning laws to allow for zoning. So there's two parcels at the end of this road, both of them are 160 acres, that had the potential that they could be broken up to 4 housing sites each or 8 home sites. But part of the requirements at that time is that in order to get a building permit, the county road or the public access would have to be upgraded to county road standards. So the contention in 2002 was that this was, while it was commonly agreed to be a public right-of-way, the contention was that it was only good for seasonal agricultural access. In 2002, the county commissioners met and determined that it would be a county road, and they said that it would maintenance, which is by state statute, whether there's any upgrades or maintenance or no maintenance at all is left up to the county commissioners. They have authority to do so. So then the issue was it's a public right-of-way, but how wide is it? Well, that issue got settled basically through a Supreme Court decision, Idaho Supreme Court decision in 2011, referred to as Halverson versus Latah County, in which the state Supreme Court went back to 1887 law establishing public right-of-ways, which said that a prescriptive right-of-way that became in the development because of public use and because of public right-of-way was presumed to have a 50-foot right-of-way. So the Supreme Court, or the Idaho Supreme Court, determined that any prescriptive right-of-way, the public right-of-way, is 50 foot in width. And beyond, that's the assumed width. Now, if it needs to be wider because of terrain and so forth, it can be enlarged, but it has to be justified. And of course, if it already exists wider because of the terrain stuff, that could be validated without additional issue. What becomes an issue at this point then is, yes, it's a public right-of-way. It's 50 feet. The right-of-way is presumed to be 50 feet, but where is that 50 feet? Well, there's a couple theories of thought. One is that it's at 50 feet is 25 feet from the center line of the road. The other theory is it can be determined by the center of the fences, that if the right-of-way is fenced. Both of these have flaws in their determination. For example, the original right-of-way or the original road may have been moved, so the center line's moved. So in effect, you're changing the property boundaries of the road. The other item is that the fences weren't necessarily represented as being a right-of-way in all cases. They may have been fenced in and encroaching on a right-of-way more so on one side than the other. So the issue you have is you have a public right-of-way, and the county can choose to do nothing as far as upgrading or maintaining it as long as it's open to public use. They're typically, they can go grade at least once every 5 years, but there is case law that indicates that the county remains a public right-of-way and cannot be forced into the decision of abandonment unless the parties that want to force abandonment can prove that the road has been open to non-use by the public for at least 20 years. So it's not a simple issue. In this case here on Bruce Lane, there's no dispute that it's been open to public use. The remaining factor is where the right-of-way actually lies. If the road stays the way it is as a seasonal agricultural use, there's no change, there's really no issue. The issue which came in 2002 and has came several other times, and presently there's 2 parcels of land that at the end of this road that this is the only public road access. So by state statute, it can't be abandoned or turned over to private ownership. There's also other landowners that access this road, but this is not their sole access to public roads. The state statute further goes, if this county is going to widen, change, or otherwise improve a road, in other words, if the county was to move forward to upgrade this road or allow it to be upgraded, one of the first things they're supposed to do is to determine where the actual boundaries of the right-of-way is. This is to avoid conflict and address issues like the moving of the road or other encroachments before any funds are expended to improve a road and avoid conflict such as unintentionally taking a private land which was beyond the right-of-way. The other issue that has to be addressed is the improvements to a road, whether it be public or private, cannot cause harm to private owners. So in this particular case, this road isn't maintained for year-round use because it's not passable in year-round. One of the problems is this hill right here. This is relatively steep. In the last few years, the county has cut the banks on this road down to make this slope more gradual, but in doing so, they've raised the elevation of the road in this area here. So when they raise the elevation of this road, there's no culvert to drain the water. So the water floods back on private ground because it has to gain enough depth to run over the water or over the road. And when it doesn't run over the road, then it's ponded here until it is absorbed in the ground. In the last few years, the county put a new culvert up here. Prior to that culvert, the elevation of the road was lower, and it was possible for this road, this borrow pit on the right side could drain to the ditch by gravity. Now recently, an attempt has been made to reopen that drain to allow the water to drain to the road or to the ditch. The problem is it's not particularly safe as far as a road transport because that's a deep open ditch, and if it's left open and adjacent to the road here with the average snow plowing or opening the road in the wintertime or grading the road, that drainage ditch would get filled and it would soon plug. So one of the first issues as far as improving this road from where it's presently maintained year-round would be to address the drainage issues here, whether it be to put a culvert across the road where it's low back there so the water would drain through, or to put a drain tile in to allow this water to be drained to this culvert or natural drain and covered it so the deepness of that borrow pit wouldn't be attached or affected. This is the culvert that was replaced. This is runs fairly high water. This culvert was, I think it was 3 years ago, 2018, when it was replaced, and the county replaced this culvert and put a wider one in there. Prior to replacement of the culvert, the one that was in here before was 10 or 12 feet, whereas that, and probably only 8 feet of road surface wide at the top because of the dirt had to be sloped in to match the fill. The other issue that's happened on this road, this used to be a one-lane road, and it had a borrow pit on each side, and the borrow pit, the water run down this borrow pit and would run into the drain. In the recent years, when the county has graded and widened this travel service road, they've also filled in the prior borrow pits, which if they aren't open to the drain, it causes the road to run down the road surface, wash the road surface. And prior to adding this culvert, it was not unusual for the narrower culvert to get washed out if the drains weren't opened. I shouldn't say the drain, but the borrow pit wasn't opened and channeled, so the water channeled in the borrow pit and away from the culvert to keep from eroding the road surface away. The next issue comes in with where the right-of-way is. Some could argue it's the center line of the road, but that steel post right there, that is a surveyed marker on the quarter section line that was surveyed to represent the southern border of the right-of-way. As I mentioned earlier, in 2002, the county basically went through procedures to validate that this road was a public right-of-way, but there was several issues contesting that in 2002 because of what the width was and different issues like that. In 2004, this property on the right side of the road sold. Again, it was purchased as an investment, and part of the way it was marketed had to do with the influence that the Tamarack Resort did in the possible new highway from Emmett to Indian Valley, which would make this desirable from people as a location to build. The buyer of this property on the right was aware of that, and one of his conditions of purchasing is that the entire property be surveyed, including this right-of-way, and that the adjacent landowners sign an agreement acknowledging the survey as the proper boundary and legal right-of-way. Now, a professional surveyor was engaged, and he surveyed and determined, in his survey of 2004, I think it was filed a record in December 2004, recognizes this right side, basically the fence line, as the southern boundary of this right-of-way. And this road from this point on for the next half mile lies in the north half of a northeast quarter of a section 21. And in 1956, prior to 1956, it was owned, both sides of the road was owned by one party. In 1956, the owner of the property on the south side of the road sold the north side, all that land lying north of the county road, with the explicit instructions that all land to the south of the road was reserved and kept by the owner. So this road became a boundary line between private properties. Now, the deed does not describe how wide that road or right-of-way was. However, the fences on this property predate that sale. So the assumption is that these fences were represented to be the road at that time. Remember, in 1956, there had been no determination by the courts that the prescriptive easement was 50 feet wide. So the owners of land on each side have went that their rights go to the fence, that the right-of-way goes to the fence lines. However, the fence line isn't 50 feet wide in all places. Some places it's wider. The other thing that's happened is this road has been widened, so the center line of the road, they basically pushed the road surface over to the right side, which has caused the center line of the road to move to the right. So in effect, actions of the county have moved, if you're using the center line of description, or moving the property boundary. Because if you're using the center line and 25 feet from the center line is the right-of-way boundary, then every time the road is widened and moved, you're moving the boundary. This is one of the main important reasons why the county, the road district, the party in charge of the road, is supposed to establish the boundaries of the right-of-way and cause to be surveyed if necessary before they expend monies and improve the right-of-way. In this case, the southern right-of-way has been surveyed by a private party. Whether the county accepted that or accepts that as a right-of-way is information I don't know. The other issue with this road is it does need to be straightened and widened. In the last 3 years, the county intent was, from the information I got from Road Boss, they were going to put the culverts in, like I showed you, one back there, and there's another one up above here, and there's a few more they had to put in. They were doing it as they had time. They were also going to take banks off the road so the road could be widened, and they were going to use that fill, so you'd widen that road base there. But on the other side, you have where it's narrow, is to use the road to fill. So basically the attempt was to keep the road more centered in the right-of-way, considering the fenced area as the right-of-way. But I don't believe they've done anything since 2018. One of the concerns with county road policy, it is in the hands of the county commissioners, and they are elected officials, and as the elected officials change, the philosophy of what they're going to do and what the direction they're going to use the road budget for can change. It's fluid. Now here, for example, you have 2 drains that come down and cross this road, and it goes down in this draw here, but there's no culvert. So when the snow comes, the water ponds up on this side and then runs across the road, and this section of the road becomes muddy and impassable by motor vehicle. This needs to be addressed before any improvements to the road surface is done, and if the road improvements are merely to put gravel to raise the road, it just makes the problem impounds and makes the problem more severe, because you'd have more water ponded up on the outside and last longer to soak up this road. This little dip that's in the center, that is where the water has been washing most recently. But this is another issue why the county, before they do improvements, need to work with adjoining landowners to address where the drainage is, because the county has a responsibility to see that they do not take actions that cause harm to private parties. Just as an individual, you cannot create a hazard for your neighbor. So in this particular case, there's options where the drain, the borrow pit on the up road side, could be improved, slopes changed, and collect the water for a new drainage culvert. But the landowner on the south side needs to be consulted, because he should have some say in where that water is going to cross onto his property, because this is highly erosive ground, and it will create a new draw, a washout, or worsen an existing one. And here this road is narrow. You have a blind spot, which there's enough room on the left side of the road that embankment could be cut out to widen the road, and the materials from that area of the road could be placed in situations like right here, where the road goes over a deep draw there, which would be a hazard. Again, the landowner could probably be consulted, and it could be a win-win situation. That fence drops to a deep draw and comes back up, which is difficult to maintain, and it's possible that agreement could be that the dirt from the uphill side, where it needs to be moved to straighten the road and widen the road, could be deposited in the dip down here, which would cause the road surface to be big and make it easier to fence that, because the road bank could be up there and the fence could go straight across that pass. Most of the changes that would be required to get an easement like this the easement width and road location issues would not be costly at all. It's just a matter of consulting with the owners and coming to agreement what would be necessary. Here, this curve right here would basically be a dangerous curve because it's a blind curve. But if you look up where the sagebrush is, this makes a fairly sharp turn. It would be possible that you could get agreement from the upland owner to move this fence, take out this curve, and take out this knob to make the fence wider. It is my understanding that the landowners on both sides of this road want this road to remain a public road and would be agreeable to work with the county to see that this right-of-way is documented and so that it could continue to be a public right-of-way. Now, as you can see in this stretch of the road, we talked about a 50-foot right-of-way, but the distance between the fences is way beyond 50 feet. That doesn't mean that the county has that much width, but there's no issue that the fences encroach upon the right-of-way here. Now here's another spot that this road turns and goes around and comes up to the fence here, and then makes a curve back. Well, that bank on the left could easily be removed to straighten that out, which would make the road straighter and remove the visual limitations hazards. Right here, this is another crossing. This has always been adequately wide, but in 2018, the same year as the one below, but I think it may have been the year before, I don't remember for sure, the county replaced this culvert in anticipation of doing further improvements. And somewhere around in this area here would be the east line of the north half of the northeast quarter, and thus so the property is no longer shared. And the wind noise is probably going to stop my talk, but what I'm going to get out and show is a yellow survey button. As I mentioned earlier, the southern boundary of this road through that last section was surveyed and represented as the southern boundary of the county road right-of-way. An important aspect of that is one of the things that counties have balked on defining right-of-ways is the cost of surveys. In this particular instance, there is a survey already in place, and it's clearly still marked, that could be used to help establish what the right-of-way should be, and in all intent, or the best option is for the right-of-way to be described and filed a record with the landowners agreeing to it to avoid or limit future confrontation. From here on, the property on the left is still the same property that has been on the left since we started up the hill. The land on the right may or may not be on the owner of the right property. The section line, it's basically a legal description line, but this road does not follow a property boundary line. In other words, this road is not used to describe a property boundary. The legal description for this section of road is based on government surveys. In other words, they're described as like in northeast quarter of section 21, etc. So the county road is not referenced, other than in title policies it refers to as, subject to the existing county roads and other rights and water easements and so forth. The fences in this area are probably narrower than 50 feet, but they are probably as wide or wider as most of the fence right-of-ways within the county. It's fairly off because the drainage, it's on top of the hill. The drainage is not a major issue, so allowing sufficient borrow pit for drainage and stuff wouldn't be a major concern. This little section of the road hill is the county road. It's public. It does have a fairly good rock base. The condition of the surface of the road is okay. What becomes an issue is, particularly in the winter time, is this is a northern slope and it stays shaded. It's icy and it's relatively steep. It was measured back in 2002, the slope to vary from 7 to 10%. With people with four-wheel drives and so forth, it's probably accessible, particularly if they have change, whether it be reasonable for like a school bus in the future to climb this, or if the county chose to take on winter maintenance this road. This would probably require them to use equipment such as a grader. Snow plows on trucks would probably not be able to plow up this road because of the slope. But that's an issue that has to do with what level of maintenance. It doesn't have to do with whether this is a public right-of-way, because this is a public right-of-way, and it's actually, it's in the county road system, and it's on what they call a limited maintenance basis. Otherwise, they do not keep it open for the winter, and they only grade it when necessary to remove ruts or other weather-related damage. This right here is the property boundary of the Nelson place, and this is the first of the two properties. The reason this road remains a county road, and a reason it can't be abandoned, because without this road, this property does not have any public road access. For years there was a fence or a gate here across this road, but in 2002, when the county went to the actions to confirm that this not only a public right-of-way, but this was a county road, at the request of I don't know for sure whether the owners or at least the properties owners that wanted to sell this property, they wanted validated this was a county road and had access, because it makes a difference of the marketability of the property. So the gate remained here, and the present owner of this property had the county requested that the gate be removed, and this cattle guard was installed by the county. And I don't know who paid for the cattle guard, but the normal policy in Washington County has been that the landowner requests the cattle guard, they pay for the cattle guard, and the county installs the cattle guard. The county did install that cattle guard, and that was in the last 2 or 3 years as well. And this portion of the road cuts through this 160 acres, the first of two. This is known as the Roy Nelson place. So prior to when the Farm to Market Road was opened up, which was 1950 plus or minus, the first right-of-way, the deeded easement for Farmers Market Road was dated 1946. When the actual construction started and completed, I do not know. But up till so after Farm to Market Road was built, and this public access road was not used as much. There was a house down in this trees, which was the Roy Nelson house. He died in 1964. Shortly thereafter, I believe before 1970, I know before 1974, because when I was first around here, that house was moved by the widow to South School Road in Midvale. And since that time, there's been no house on this road. Now the county turned around as far as their annual maintenance, and they did not maintain this part of the road. This part of the road became impassable. It washed out. There's no borrow pits, and it washed through the road. People still used the road, but they didn't stay on the roadway. They would drive up on the banks into the field and past the bad sections, and this right through here was the bad section of the road. Once you get up on top, it didn't wash out because it didn't have the slope or the hills around it to drain. So prior to the county adding this road into the road system in 2002, the fence came here. There was a gate across the road and went to there and went on, and this fence on the other side did not exist. But in 2002, again, the next property, which is called the Horton property, has no access without this road. So this road continues on to a half mile. So where that gate is, panels, that is the end of the county public road, and going straight, you enter onto the Horton property. The historical Happy Hollow Road turned left there and followed the fence line. I don't see a fence there. You can see where the old road went, and went across and went basically around this hill and joined and went about to where that barn is, and then went left in line up in front of that house there, and it either went straight or you made a right turn, and it joined Widener Road, which was another road that was basically replaced when Farm to Market Road was installed. From Farm to Market Road, they built a new road, which is presently known as Happy Hollow Road. It came from Farm to Market and comes in, and it attached to where this part of the Happy Hollow Road ceased to exist, or ceased to be used. In 2002, the purchaser of this 160 acres wanted the county to assure him that this road was a public road, and that's when the validation came to it. The logical thing that would happen is that this property would have been connected to the new Happy Hollow Road, because as you can see, it's the same elevation. There's no crossings in it. But the land on that end of the property where the road was sold. It wasn't maintained to be open for the public, and enough years had passed by 2002 that it was probably would have been difficult to get opened up in court to validate as a public road, particularly when this road, even though not maintained, had been open to the public to use. I mean, you could get here on a four-wheel drive pickup or by leaving the right-of-way, or you could go through the right-of-way if you had a four-wheel drive. But it was still open to the public. There was nobody stopping you from traveling. One issue that's been addressed is about whether the county should upgrade this road, and I think it probably originates from the county. If they're going to maintain this road basically ends here with a 50-foot right-of-way. So if the owners of this land want this road to be maintained open, there's going to need to be some concessions to deal with providing a turnaround. Public, like I am going to be able to turn around this right-of-way because in the car, but if you use the county and a road grader, you'd need a wider space to turn around. And if you were in a snowplow situation, truck, you'd need to turn around. And as with being open to the public, if somebody got up here with a pickup and trailer, that should be accommodated, but that's a separate issue. So basically, to summarize, this is a public right-of-way. The county upgraded it and made sure that it was in the county road system in 2002. There was one dissenting vote originally from one of the commissioners, said that this additional half mile that we're presently on, where it hadn't been maintained by the county, it should go through a validation hearing. I believe there was a hearing, but presently, and I thought I attended it. I believe I attended it. I remember specific testimony about it, but as at this point, that hearing isn't referenced in the county commission minutes. There is a possibility the hearing notes from 2002 are in other records, but at this time, they haven't been identified. But regardless of that, the county added to the road system, and by statute, if a road is added to the system in 5 years, prescriptive use, the county it can become a public right-of-way. And it also, as far as from the hearing standpoint, what the courts have ruled in a number of cases is the road was expanded public. They had 5 years to object, which is the 5 years to get it. If there's no objections, that is an affirmation that there's acceptance. And in this case, the validation was actually sought by the landowners. This is the Horton Place. It's 160 acres. This on the right is the Nelson Place. It is 40 sections, 40 acres, quarter sections in a row. So as now, the way the road uses agricultural access road is there's really no issue. It's a public right-of-way that can be accessed seasonally as the weather permits. It is actually, if somebody wanted to build on this property, the building season from this is the 1st of May, but back into April into October, the weather is such and the road is such that basically any kind of construction equipment that you needed to get up here to build or access the property is capable of doing. In the winter months, when there is snow on the ground, or if you're in a highly rain situation where there's mud, then that's different. But the urgency of making a decision on upgrading this road has time, because there's taking the time to deliberate and making sure the easements are clearly identified and any conflicts are settled can be done before construction of the road is started. So the issue goes back to, it's a public right-of-way. It's pertinent for the officials, the county officials, road supervisor, or whatever's involved, to meet with the landowners, view the property, provide the specifications, not only what would be needed to make it just better, but they should look long-range future on the possibility that there may be a number of houses up here, so that they establish the right-of-way to accommodate future additions or improvements to the road that may be necessary to make this up to the standards that are specified for what's considered a safe access road for residential housing. This video again is just meant to be informative, to help those that are trying to understand the issues with public right-of-ways and where to go. And of course, one of the big issues with this and the growth is if this is public right-of-way, it's generally assumed the county will pay for it, but the county has control whether it be upgraded, and if there's no general public justification and shortage of funds, should the county be obligated to pay for it? On the other hand, should the private landowners be denied the right to all-weather access to the road? Well, you could say that they could pay for it, but it is a public right-of-way. And there is perhaps methods that they can pay for through road development agreements, etc. But even in those cases, the county is in charge, and they're entrusted to protect the public interest to make sure that there's adequate agreements in place to acknowledge the public right-of-way and what limitations any private individual has, so that they do not gain or impede or encroach the interest that the county and the public have in the road. I hope you weren't too bored with this, and have a good day.